Everyone says that teachers must build relationships in order to succeed at classroom management, but no one really tells you how to do that. Well, that's exactly what I'm sharing in this video, along with a few other classroom management strategies. If you're new here, I'm Rachel Vincent, and I love sharing ways to help teachers simplify their classroom and their teaching. So let's talk about relationships, because that's what everyone says is the most important thing to do with classroom management. And it is very important. I do think that if you don't have a relationship with your students where you know them on a personal level, it is harder to figure out what is going to work for certain students. So one of the easiest ways to work on relationships while also building that classroom community is to do some sort of social emotional type of learning or lessons. Now, there are a ton of things out there. I will say some schools have certain curriculum to use. That's what my school has. We have the Leader in Me program. So all of our social emotional lessons are geared towards that aspect, but we do a lot of talking about emotions and reactions, being proactive, and those types of things. We also talk about goal setting, and there's all sorts of things that kind of get incorporated because we're a Leader in Me school, but that doesn't mean you can't do or find lessons like this. There are so many amazing things out there. There's TBT lessons. I actually wrote a blog post about some of the SEL activities that I do that I will link below in the description to kind of get you started. But having some sort of time, whether you do it a couple times a week or daily, where you are actually teaching students how to deal with their emotions and how to be social and different things like that, teaching some of those soft skills really go a long way in your classroom. Another thing that I love doing that just sort of builds those relationships, teaches students those soft skills, but lets students know that we like to have fun in our classroom, is to play team building games. We do this as part of our team building Tuesday is our normal day. This year we're doing it on a Thursday, but it really doesn't matter what day you do it, just fun, different games. I have several videos about that. I will link those as well. And then probably one of my favorite things I do, I know the students love the team building games probably the most, but I do think their second favorite is our class meetings on Friday. Every Friday we sit down in the morning for our class meeting, and we start our class meeting with student shout outs to where they are shouting out other students who have done something kind or nice. I think it, one, gets students thinking beyond themselves, but two, helps students be recognized for things that they are doing that maybe I don't see, or that kind of goes above and beyond those academics. A lot of times it is things like, you know, I want to shout out so-and-so for playing with me at recess, or so-and-so let me use their crayons, or just different little things that maybe go unnoticed by the teacher, but it's happening in your classroom. So we start with that, and then we go into what we call kudos and celebrations. This is when students get to share about themselves, because a lot of times they want to shout themselves out in the first part, but I said, nope, we save ourselves. We talk about others in the first part, we talk about ourselves in the second part. So this is typically when students just share what's going on in their lives, different tournaments or activities they're doing. Maybe they're going to visit a grandparent, they're going somewhere fun, they're going to the trampoline park, and just sharing different things that are happening in their lives. And that's a great way for other students to feel a connection with somebody else. So maybe they have a grandparent that's coming to visit, or they also play that same sport, but also for me just to see what's going on in my students' lives that's outside of school. Then we go into our, what we call Plus Delta, which is a Leader in Me thing, but basically it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever heard of like highs and lows, but basically our pluses are the things that went well. What have we been doing well this week? And this is where we really focus in on the positives, things that are going well, and then our delta are things that we want to change. What are some things we want to change? Maybe it didn't quite go as well, we need to work a little more at it. And so this is a great time to work on those classroom management skills of maybe this routine is just not working and we need to change it, or we just need to adjust it. Some years it's hard to find the pluses, but I always make sure we find some. There's always room for improvement is what I tell them when they can't, when they're like sitting there staring at me and not wanting to tell me any deltas. I'm like, there's always places we can improve. And so usually after we get our list going, we will choose one of those deltas, one of those areas for growth that we are going to focus on the next week and make that our weekly goal as a class. So a lot of times it's like lining up correctly, or voice level 0 after the bell rings. Making sure we raise our hand when we're at the carpet learning. We usually make that our goal for the following week. So then after we do our plus deltas, we have what's called questions and concerns, where any questions they might have or concerns they want to bring before the class that we need to discuss, and then we end it with choosing our visionary of the week, which I think is also a great way to get to know your students. We call it visionaries because that's the name of our class. We're Miss Vincent's Visionaries, but just student of the week, leader of the week, scholar of the week, whatever you want to call it. But it's a great way to get to know your students personally. I have a whole video on that I will link below, but they're bringing in show and tell and sharing some of their favorites, and their parent writes them a letter, and we get to know them a little bit more on a personal level. And it's just a great way to, again, just build those relationships with your students, and your students build that with each other. Most of these things usually only take us about 15 minutes each morning. I used to think I would never have time for that. There's no way I could do all that, but it just became one of those non-negotiables for me. And I have really seen the difference in how it affects our class community. To be completely honest, some years, the group of kids you have, it honestly doesn't matter what you do. You're just gonna have those kinds of conflicts. There's going to be some students who it doesn't always work well with, but I always try to think like that 80-20% rule. 80% of the time it works well for typically 80% of the kids, and there's that 20% that not always, but 80 is still better than struggling with that relationship component and classroom management component. Another thing I wanted to share as far as classroom management was just sort of how I deal with conflict. And it's one of those things that I think is hard to teach to someone else or share with someone else. It's just something that I have learned to do over time. And full transparency, classroom management was my biggest struggle as a beginning teacher, as I think it is most teachers. I have worked really hard at this over the years. I feel like classroom management is one of my strengths now, but again, I've been doing this 21 years and it has taken time to learn all this. And like I said, again, it's that 80-20. It doesn't work 100% of the time, but 80% of the time it does work. One of the things I try my hardest to do is to, when I am redirecting a student or dealing with a behavior issue, is to do it in private. So of course, like if a kid is goofing off, you know, I will say, so-and-so, let's get focused. What are you supposed to be doing? And get them back on track. But if it's becoming like one of those, the kid is shutting down or the kid is out of control, I just ask them to go in the hallway. Like, let's go in the hallway and chat. It's one of those things, again, it's hard to teach. You kind of have to know when you can talk to it. When a kid is out of control and their emotions are dysregulated, you are not going to be able to really have a conversation with them. So usually once I get them in the hallway, I say, you know, you seem kind of upset. Do you want to go to the bathroom, go get some water, go take a walk? Like, get them to calm down in some way before you can have that conversation. Sometimes I can just immediately have a conversation, but it's in the hallway privately and not in front of their friends, their classmates, to where I can figure out what happened, what's going on, if I need to pull other students to have a discussion. And so that's kind of where I deal with most issues. If I do it publicly, it's meaning I do it in front of the class. It is not a major behavior. It is a minor. It's somebody's off task. Somebody's just being goofy. And so usually I just question them. I'm like, hey, what are you supposed to be doing right now? And they typically know. And if they don't, that's where I can fix the behavior. And I like to follow that up sometimes with, after they tell me what they're supposed to be doing, I say, okay, what are you gonna do next? So that they know that they can't continue what they're doing before they get to the supposed to. So let's say they're supposed to be working on their math and they're over there pretending to do a TikTok dance. So what are you supposed to be doing? Working on my math. What are you going to do? Or what are you about to do next? Work on my math, so that they know they need to sit down and get started. Another thing that I think is very helpful is to have a place in your classroom where you can separate a student from the issues or the distractions. So we know that students' attention spans are very little, and getting them to focus on a task for a long period of time can be difficult. And so sometimes there's just that one or two students that just won't get focused and are distracting everyone around them. So having a place where they can go work in your classroom, I have an extra desk that I just say, hey, so-and-so, why don't you go sit at this desk and get your work done? And so it's just a way for them to move out of their comfort zone with the group of students they're sitting with and go get work. Hopefully that calms it down. Sometimes if I need to separate more students because I really only have space for that one table, I'll have them come sit at my small group table and work that way, especially if I know it's probably a task that they're struggling with and that's why they're goofing off at off task. And if it's like a serious situation where like I've removed them, they're still off task, I have arranged with the other teachers on my grade level to where a student can go sit in their classroom. And sometimes just removing them, especially if it's like a class clown type of situation where it doesn't matter where they are in the room, they're going to rile the students up and get everyone's attention. Just moving them into another classroom typically works wonders. I also have that, what we call it a sideline, where they just go to the sideline. They move away from things. Students have that option to sideline themselves. So if they're like, somebody's just being silly at their table and they want to focus, they can move themselves away as well. I think this was part of my struggle as learning how to manage a classroom, was communicating with parents. I think as a young teacher, I felt intimidated by communicating with parents, and that definitely has faded as I've gotten older. I do know at first it can be a little difficult because you don't know the parent's reaction. I typically always try to handle things in the classroom, and if it's still not working, then I reach out to the parent. Most often, parents will be on board with helping, and at least what it does, even if it doesn't fix the situation, a lot of times when the student knows that you're communicating with their parent, they're able to, I guess, realize it's a big deal, and so they tend to, I guess, regulate themselves. So that happened this year. I had a group of boys who were just silly and goofy and just doing things at inappropriate times. And so I separated them, I addressed it, I did all the things I could do, and it was still continuing to happen. I thought, okay, I gotta let parents know because I need their help to have the conversation with their parents, and maybe that will help. And it fixed it. Like, I was like, I should have emailed those parents sooner, but it fixed the problem. Like, of course, they're still goofy. They're still boys. They're still goofy, but they now know, like, when I'm like, okay, I separate them, they get down to business. And so don't be afraid to communicate with parents. There are always extreme cases, and so you just kind of have to play that by ear, but don't be afraid to communicate with parents when you need sort of that extra step and support. And of course, having those clear expectations and follow through. I think the follow through part was probably my biggest downfall as a new teacher. Is I had the expectations, this is what I want you to do, but I would give warning after warning after warning. If you do this, this is gonna happen. If I said, if you do this, this is gonna happen. And I never actually gave the consequence. Know what your consequences are and follow through. So if a kid is goofing off and not getting their work done, and I say, so-and-so, if you don't get busy, you're gonna have to sideline. And 5 minutes later, if they're not busy, I have to sideline them. Because if I say, I told you you need to get busy or you're gonna be sidelined, all that did was tell the kid, she's not gonna make me sideline, I'm just gonna keep goofing off. So you have to follow through with your consequences. You have to have that expectation, and if that's your expectation, make sure you meet it, because if you meet it, your students will meet it. I know it's easier said than done, and some days and some times of the year you are so tired and so exhausted, and it's hard to do the follow through, but it is so important to do it. If I am doing all these things, building relationships, having those clear expectations and consequences, communicating with parents, my students know what's expected of them, they know if they misbehave, this is gonna happen. I rarely have to reward for behavior. And so I think that's where a lot of like sort of these classroom management tricks and things like that reward for behaviors. But if you're just doing it, you don't necessarily have to give a reward for behaviors. So a lot of people, when I say I use Class Dojo, I don't use it for behavior. I use it for our class. I pay them for their class jobs. I use it for teacher compliments. I use it for our dress up days. I use it for showing their work in math. Occasionally, when it's like this high sort of stressful time of the day, I will use it, like sometimes I use it during pack up when like they're getting a little wild and I can't redirect everybody. So I just walk up and I just start giving dojo points to anybody who's like sitting quietly. So yes, I do use it for things like that sometimes when I just need to like bring the energy level down a little bit in the classroom, but more often than not, I'm not rewarding for behavior because I'm just expecting them to behave and we're moving on. If you want to try a team building day in your classroom, I've got you covered with some of our favorite games that we play. Check out the video that's on your screen now.